This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Chinazom Nwabueze on the show. He is the founder of Dreamcatchers Performance. He's a high-performance leadership coach. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about something that's kind of important to me and really should be important to everybody, and that's talking about mental fitness and what that means and well-being and how we can maybe get better at some of that. And I know a lot of us tech leaders struggle sometimes with asking for help and getting to that point, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to make that easier for us all. Anyway, with all that being said, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, John. Yeah, really great to be on here and very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today and why this is important to you.
Okay. So I always start off with, I'm a dad of two beautiful kids. So I've got a boy who's 3.5 and my daughter's 8 months. And how I got to where I am today was I was working in investment banking and I wanted a different career. I thought there was something more I should be doing. And that's when I met my wife. So I started a transition of becoming a performance psychologist. So I started working with athletes and we decided to transition from the UK to the US while my wife was pregnant. So I came over to the US, COVID hit, I had to kind of adjust. So I became a high performance leadership coach. So I started working with leaders in different areas, tech, not just tech, also working with people in banking, all over the place. So during the pandemic, there was a truth that I really discovered, which is there is no sustainable high performance without well-being. And now I've been trying to spread that far and wide in where I came up with mental fitness. So I'm really, now that we're coming out of the pandemic, I feel like we really need to grasp that truth that we all saw, that you can't perform at a high level unless you take care of your mental fitness. And then that allows you to show up as a leader. So that's what I'm trying to do through my company, Dreamcatchers, and also through the book I've just written, Real Talk.
Awesome. So when it comes to, mental fitness, how do you define that for someone? Because, people, I've heard all different kinds of things that people try to do to have a fit mind, whether it be taking breaks, avoiding burnout, meditation. But what is it to you?
I mean, the first, mental fitness for me is like basically when you have your mental well-being, it's basically just being as proactive as possible to understand what are the things you need to maintain it. So what fills up your emotional energy tank? What gives you joy? What kind of movement do you need to do? How do you take breaks between you and your thoughts? And then also really understanding the things that take all your energy, work, family, projects. How do you manage that? How do you put boundaries in place? How do you deal with fear of missing out? Mm-hmm. And then how do you protect the energy when it's in there from all the uncertainty, stress, the anxiety? What tools do you use to practice? So that's the way I define it. And I find that it's a journey, so you never really crack it. So, at one point you think you're really on top of it, and I became a dad again for the second time, realizing that I had to start again, to start relearning, okay, what gives me joy now? How much time do I have when I do exercise? Like, what do I need to adjust? And it's a journey, and I feel like the more you talk with different people, the more you see different things that you can kind of learn from and add to your mental fitness toolkit. So you have to keep adding to it again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned your dad too. I've got 3 kids of my own, and it was a big jump going from 1 kid to 2 kids. Like, it was a huge, huge jump. Luckily, from 2 to 3 is not that bad. It's not that much different.
Well, you're filling me with joy because so there's another friend. She's just come back from work. And so I'm like 8 months ahead. She's now 3 months, and we want to share stories because everyone's really scared me about 1 to 2. I won't lie, it was a huge jump, but my adaptability skills have improved immensely. Going for 1 to 2.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about figuring out what drains you and what kind of fills your bucket there. Because they're different things. And I remember before I had kids, I was working a lot of hours, and I got into this habit of thinking that I had to put in these hours and I had to put in this work to get ahead in my career, and I think part of having kids kind of reset my priorities a little bit and let me understand kind of, was I working, was being in the office really putting, the right priority on things? Have you seen that with a lot of your clients?
Well, I'm going to start with myself. I think that I love that point you just said, because that was a huge thing for me. I was always working in the corporate space. So you got to be in the office 8 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
The more time you spent at your desk, the more you were really solving problems and pushing the needle. And then flipping that to becoming like owning my own business and having to come up with new ideas, I kind of realized that my office, I couldn't just sit at the desk from 8 to 6 because I wasn't actually producing anything. And that's where I realized that to be creative, you can't just sit there and just keep pushing. And I find my son was the best tool for prioritization, because when he came along, there was like, you only have 2 hours or 3 hours. And it's amazing when you tell yourself you only have 2 hours, I would go for loads and loads of walks. But then by the time I come back, it's like, what is the most important thing you need to do? And I was 10 times more productive when I was actually doing that than all those times when I was sitting there just giving myself a headache again and again. And I've been trying to do that with all the leaders that I work with, is clear your calendar. Like literally, if you have meetings back to back to back, I guarantee you're not coming up with anything creative. You're just going from one thing to the other on autopilot. And the moment that people can start to create space to just kind of let your mind just settle in and actually, I call it mind wandering, where you can just put things together, then it's amazing how productive you become. And I find, like with parents, I think kids are the blessing, because they actually do show you that when you have a short period of time, you actually are really, really super ruthless at prioritizing what you're going to do. And then that's where I feel like you really take it to your thinking and your work to that next level.
Yeah, I think you hit something really, really special right there when you talked about creating space. And there was a book that I read probably 10 years ago now called The Accidental Creative by Todd Henry. And when I read that book, he talked about how creative work doesn't happen in a scheduled meeting. It doesn't happen on scheduled times. It happens in the margins. And, I think that's, and maybe scheduling time on your calendar, that's that blank space, because if you're like me, you're always getting meeting invites. If your calendar's open, someone's going to stick something on there. So what do you think about like putting like a blank space somewhere on your calendar to keep that time open for mind wandering?
Well, luckily I use, God, I don't remember the name now. There's something on my calendar that automatically, if there's blank space, it will put focus time on there. And then I'll go, do not disturb. So I always look in my calendar for how much focus time do I have. And if I don't have like 2 hour blocks of that, then it starts to worry me, because then I know that I'm going to be a little bit burnt out at the end of the day. So if you have it's called Clockwise. That's the name. It just came to me. If you have something like Clockwise, if you don't have Clockwise, firstly, that's when I work with clients, I tell them in the beginning of each week, go and claim your time before somebody else can book it. So look at your time and also know about your energy levels. So for me in the morning, that's when I'm most productive. Now so much with 2 kids, I now have to learn how to be productive at other times, but morning is my prime time. So I will try and protect that time as much as possible really early in the morning, so that I know that if I have an hour and a half or 2 hours, the amount of work I can get done, as opposed to if it's spread out all through the day. So really try and protect that time. And if you have apps that can start helping you do that, and then make sure you put do not disturb, because I know what you mean. You book it and then someone decides that, it's not a priority, I can just go and book over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some reoccurring things. I call it project work, where it's just empty space. It's time. I'm really good before lunch. After lunch, I fall off a cliff. I don't know if it's the calories or what it is, but I try to book a lot of time before lunch. And I usually try to get to the office, an hour before anybody else, just so I have that empty space in the morning. And then I book another hour usually before lunch, so I can sit and just kind of focus, before I go to eat, just to get some of that time. I think it's a really good idea.
I was going to add to that as well, is it's not just being at your desk, because what I found with when I was with my son, just when I used to walk with him, and it'd be amazing how you think you're just walking, but your brain is like actually producing and solving problems, so that by the time you come to your desk, then magic just pulls out. So sometimes it's like when you have that time, don't feel you always have to be at your desk. Like being in nature or being somewhere else actually helps, I think, with getting stuff done.
Yeah, I love to take walks. I think walking meetings are really important. I do pretty much all of my one-on-ones as walking meetings, just so I can get out of the office and get in nature and walk around the pond. And, it also, in my opinion, it changes the dynamics of a conversation. You know, if I'm sitting at my desk and someone's sitting in front of me, then there's this like hierarchical thing that's there that doesn't allow for freedom to discuss things openly. But when you're walking, you're side by side and you're able to have that discussion, you know, in a more,
No, that's a good point. I like that, actually.
you know, level place, I think. It's less intimidating for people, I think.
Yeah, I like that point. I do agree. When you're out in nature and you're talking with someone, it's just more of a free-flowing conversation as well.
Yeah.
When you're at your desk.
Yeah, and you're right. You know, a lot of times when I get stuck at a problem, I remember back in, you know, during COVID when we were all locked down, we were at the house, you know, I'd get frustrated with something at work, and my kids were doing homeschool at the time, you know, because everything was shut down. I was like, come on, let's go for a walk. We'd go for a family walk. And I'd come back, and it's like all of a sudden I had answers to problems that I didn't have before, and I was able to kind of get the flow going. Do you think that's getting outside, or do you think it's more of like you're moving, you're getting your body moving?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there's something, I listened to this podcast where it talks about mind wandering, and there's a creative part of our brain. So if you've looked at a problem already, you've passed it over to your subconscious. But once you start moving and you're out in nature, then you've freed up if you're at your desk, you just keep going back to it again and again. But you've actually freed up that space so that your subconscious can actually start working it out. So that's why when you come back, all of a sudden the answer just comes out of nowhere. Whereas if you sat at your desk for 3 hours drinking coffee and just banging your head, nothing would happen.
Right. Yeah. You know, so what kind of tips or advice do you have to, let's say, a new leader that is struggling with their prioritization? Because we talked about prioritization kind of being one of those big things to kind of keep your mental well-being in check.
Yeah, I think there's a great article, I think it's in Harvard Business Review, about how to manage your energy, not your time. And I feel like with any leader, before you start thinking about prioritization, is looking at your energy flow during the day, making sure that you're doing things to fill up your energy, and then looking at your the schedule during the day. When do you, like you said, you fall off the cliff at 12 or 1.
Yeah.
So don't book any serious things when you know you're really going to be tired. Use that time to actually, go and rejuvenate. So when you start to think about where your energy is during the day, then you can kind of book the right things for the right period. And then the prioritization is, obviously I can't say everyone needs to have kids. You don't really need to have kids, but if you the way I look at it is like pick an hour and a half and just say, right, okay, I only have this time, and kind of task yourself, like, what is the most important thing I need to get done? And usually I don't believe in to-do lists. I feel like there should only be 2 or 3 things that are really like, if you only had an hour and a half and the world is about to end, not saying I don't want to be grim here, but it's very easy to then all of a sudden, like people always have all these to-do lists. It's very easy. Like you just knock off, okay, that can go, that can go, that can go. It's just these 2 things. And if you can keep doing that, that always keeps taking you to that next level. And then if you knock off those big things, you'd be amazed how much it fills you with energy. Like, oh my God, I just did. Then the rest of everything on your to-do list just becomes so much easier and you just so more efficiently. Then when you just have everything there and you're giving everything the same priority when it doesn't, and then things are taking your energy that really shouldn't. And then what happens is when you come to the big things, you've kind of dissipated a bit of your energy and then it becomes too big. Well, and also, God forbid, you're doing it at the wrong time. So for you, you're trying to do that big thing at 2:00 after lunch. That's like,
that's nap time.
Yeah. It's not going to get done.
Yeah. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. What you're kind of saying is maybe set yourself false deadlines or something to give yourself a limited time scope so you can kind of really think about what do I need to do if I only had 2 hours. Instead of thinking like I have 8 hours, I can go get a cup of coffee, I can stroll around, kind of give yourself 2 hours and think about what you can get done in that 2 hours and then prioritize the bigger things first, the bigger impacts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. In software project management, we have this concept of boulders versus pebbles versus like sand. We think like and if you have like a bucket, if you put the sand in first and then the pebbles, there's not enough room for the boulders. But if you put the boulders in first and then the smaller rocks and then pour the sand in, the sand can kind of trickle in and fill up the space. And I think that's a great way of approaching it.
Yeah, that's exactly, I like that, boulders, sand, and then rocks, to kind of thing there. You got to get the boulders in first. So don't kind of be patting yourself on the back when you're filling it up with sand because the boulders are definitely not going to come in.
Yeah, there was a book that I read a long time ago by Brian Tracy. I can't remember. I have no idea what the name of it is. But I just remember that he had a concept of like, if you have to eat 3 frogs, eat the biggest one first. Hopefully we don't have to eat frogs these days. But.
I know. Strange analogy, but I get his point. Make sure you fall first.
Yeah, exactly. What are some things that we can do whenever we feel like ourselves is getting burned out and kind of worn out? We prioritize, we realize the important things, but after like a couple of weeks, we're still getting tired. We're getting worn out. We're getting, our mind isn't working as well as it should. What are some things that we can do to get that mental fitness in our brains?
I think that you should really start looking at the signs your body is sending you. And I feel like that's where, I don't know, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
You can say whatever you want.
I call it the fuck it switch. You just you have to hit that fuck it switch, because if you're trying again and again and you keep feeling tired and things are working, that's a time that you need to step back. And I feel like then you really need to go look at your energy tank. Usually you'll find that your energy level is at that critical level. You've just been pushing. And now you really need to step back and start filling your tank up, because all those things that you're trying to push for, if you keep pushing at this level, you're going to burn out. And when you crash, it's like all those things that you're trying to go for, they're not going to happen. So that's why I call it the fuck it switch, because it's like there's that time to you're about to lose everything. So you need to just step back. The world's not going to end. Now go back, fill your energy tank, whatever it is you need, how much time you need to. And I promise you, when you come back, you fresher with more energy, thinking clearly, is 10 times better than just, I can't stop, I have to keep going, I've got this deadline, what's going to happen? It's like, it's just 10 times better to hit that switch and go and do the work that's needed.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people carry too much. And if you think about it, like, I see my kids a lot. I get a lot of lessons from my kids. And I'm sure you will too once they get a little bit older. But you'll see them like, you'll tell them, hey, take these things up to your room, all your toys that you brought down, take them up to your room. And they'll try to carry them all in one trip. And they don't realize they're carrying too much and they just drop it and things go everywhere. But if they just set them down, and instead of dropping them when it gets too much, and making a big mess, you just set them down neatly, then you can pick them back up again in a better way, once you've taken that break and your muscles aren't as sore, And I think the same thing is true with your mind. Kind of like what you say, just, when to turn off that switch versus going nuts and dropping everything.
Kids are the best teachers, aren't they? Where they show us things in the simplest form. It's like you try and carry everything, you probably end up dropping 3 or 4 of them. The time that you were trying to save or not wanting to leave one down, it's like it doesn't work out in the end. And I think that is kind of an important thing for our mind. Where it's such a weird thing. I don't know. As we're all raised in this competitive environment, we have to keep pushing and giving our best. I feel that's why we struggle with putting things down. We're like, no, I can't. I've got to do it all now. And for me, I just found like during the pandemic, I felt like people kind of started to realize that if you that thing or whatever it is that's chasing you is just not true. Because if you keep pushing and keep trying to do everything now, you just end up burning out. Whereas actually, if you put it down, take some time and do it step by step, you still get it done, and you get it done in a better way. So that you don't get burnt out, your family, you still get to spend that time with your family.
Yeah, and when you said step by step, it reminded me of another funny thing my middle son did one time. I told him to get ready really quickly, and he thought he could put both of his socks on at the same time, faster than he could do one at a time. And I heard him watch him struggle, like put both feet out, try to put both socks on. I'm like, just do one at a time. He's like, but I can do it both together. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to take you 10 times longer to do it both together than.
And you fall over. I know.
Yeah, but if you take that analogy and go back to what you just said about, the tasks that we do on a daily basis, a lot of times we as leaders think that we could take on multiple projects, and instead of prioritizing and doing the one at a time and getting things actually done.
And it's when we get excited, because we're doing our jobs, we love the job, we start to see a bit of success, so we're excited. You just remind me of my son. He's like, you tell him he's going to go and watch Spider-Man or he's going to get a dessert. He will just like run it, and he'll run and hurt himself. Like, just breathe, just relax. You're still going to get to do the thing. And I feel like the leaders, we get like that. We get excited. Mm-hmm. A new AI tool has come out. We're like, oh my God, I can solve something. And then we forget to just breathe and just like, okay, let's take this one at a time and like do it in a kind of sustained way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we do get like that. I think we're just like big kids. So you wrote this book, Real Talk. Tell me a little bit about it, why you put that together, and what's it about?
So why did I put it together? I put it together from getting to coach through the pandemic, and I just realized that seeing all the different leaders I worked with, the way they kind of had to change, pivot, adapt. I think you talked about homeschooling, like watching parents having to homeschool. So I felt like we learned so much about our well-being, and I felt coming out of it, I wanted to try and capture all those stories in a way so that now that we come out, we don't forget the lessons we learned, and we can kind of take that to say, okay, this is what we're capable of doing if we look after our mental fitness. So I decided to write the book, and I wanted to talk about mental fitness, and I decided to write it for men because there were some high-profile issues that happened at the time. One of them was DJ Twitch from The Ellen Show, who taken his own life. And two of my friends at the time, I'm now in my mid-40s, they'd had mental breakdowns. And I just kept seeing this recurring pattern. It's like, why does this keep happening to men where we just kind of have these mental breakdowns? And that's when I started to think about mental fitness. I wanted to put it in a story format because I felt like men, we're kind of set up for failure. We're not allowed to show our emotions. We don't even know how to feel those emotions. And then society always tells us of this thing where we have to be the breadwinner. We have to be the one carrying everything on our shoulders. And I just felt like that was just a recipe for disaster. And when I think about my son, I was like, I wanted to kind of do something so that he's not in that same situation, set up for failure. So that was where I decided to put the book. I didn't want the book to be in a kind of, I'm preaching to you and this is what you need to do. I just wanted to be like a story. So I created these 4 characters who meet up after the pandemic, and all of a sudden they're having real conversations. They've known each other all their lives, but they're now having real conversations about their mental fitness and the challenges. And what I really wanted was for people to see themselves in the stories and kind of think, okay, now I can recognize with that, and I'm going to try and do something different from reading the book.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I think it's a great approach too, because, we don't like to be preached at, right? We don't like to, have people tell us we're wrong. And you're right. Growing up, at least where I grew up, you were kind of pushed, made fun of a little bit if you cried, if you showed emotion. You never saw your dad cry, as a child. And it's always, the tough guy kind of thing, mentality. And it is difficult for men in at least I grew up in the South of, it's difficult for us to show emotion sometimes.
Yeah. Well, how are you doing it with your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, that's well, I try to let them know that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset. We also, one of the important things that I've tried to do with my kids is get them involved early in sports and in martial arts so that they can learn discipline and learn that failure is okay. It's okay to lose, It's good to be competitive. You need to be competitive, but it's also okay to lose, as long as you give it your best. I try to I have one son that's very emotional about certain things. My other son is not emotional yet about certain things. So, we had a dog that we had to put down a few months ago, and it was really sad. And honestly, I've had dogs that have died before, and that's really sad. But when you see your kids get heartbroken because of that, it's even worse. Like, it's just, it's awful. But, when we let the kids have, before that day came, we had our last day with him. We took him for his last walk, which he couldn't even finish. We had to carry him. But it was really sad to let the kids, sit there and just go through it and have their breakdown. And it's like, it's okay. It's got to be sad. And my daughter was like, how long am I going to be sad for? I'm like, a long time. It's okay. But eventually you'll get, you'll start feeling a little bit better. Some things will make you happy. You'll but the memory will always be there, and you'll always be sad. When you think about them, and it's okay. It's just part of life, and it's just something that they get to experience. And there's got to be sad times, there's got to be happy times. But I think it's you let them cry it out, let them show them that you're sad too, that it makes you upset too. When we put Apollo down, we all cried, the whole family. It's okay to see that. It's good for them to see their parents cry too.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I haven't had to deal with that life and death, telling them about life and death yet, but I know, I could in your voice, it's definitely a tough one where your little ones have to finally experience that sadness. But I think I love what you said, is trying to show them that mommy and daddy can cry as well. Life sometimes is going to be tough. We're not always going to be happy in life, and just being able to have space for all those different emotions. Work is definitely a big one.
And I think it's something to teach them that, one of the things you mentioned, DJ Twitch, committing suicide. Suicide's been on the rise. It seems like it's on the rise. Maybe it's just more in the news, but I've had several fraternity brothers in college that have, committed suicide over the past couple of years. Now that we're in our 40s, things like that are happening. And it's super sad. And it's one of those things I want to make sure my kids know that's not, there's ways through this without that. That's not an option. There's other things that we can do. And, you're going to have tough times, but guess what? We'll get through it. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
You just give it time.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's rising, but I know the men make up that huge statistic of that. And I don't know why it seems to be in this age of mid-40s to mid-50s where that number seems to really be growing. And, I mean, I don't know the reasons where men makes someone do that. And I'm sure there are many, many reasons that we can't fix all of them. But I definitely know for me, when it was close to someone I knew, just talking about it is the thing. And that's why I wanted to try and get in my book is like, when you actually talk about it, I feel like that can help in some shape or form because sometimes we're going out, we're just in our own heads trying to fix all the problems again and again. And that's nowhere to just have all the things happen in your head. Because I can't tell you the amount of times when I've actually just picked up the phone and talked to a friend. And when you talk to a friend, you say the thing out loud, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why am I getting so upset about that? And then the friend doesn't have to do anything. Sometimes they're just creating that safe space so that you can actually get it off your chest. And I feel like that's why I'd love men to start doing a lot more, is just in groups talking a lot more and sharing the issues that they're having.
Yeah, I think something you said there kind of resonated with me is saying it out loud. And a lot of times, I'll go back to our kids again. My kids will be really upset by something, so my son, he has a Nintendo Switch and he was playing a game and something glitched and it didn't save his progress. And he lost like an hour's worth of progress. And, we also limit their screen time. So now he's not going to be able to catch up to the hours of the time. And he was like melting down. Oh, it didn't save. I was like, so it didn't save a game that you like to play? He's like, yeah, I like to play it. And did you have fun getting to this point in the game? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, guess what? Now you get the opportunity to get there again. You get to go do it again. And guess what? Now that you've done it once, you can do it better and you can get more stuff. And it was like, oh, I said, say it out loud. If you say it out loud, you realize like, oh, it's not so bad.
My son's now old enough where when he gets really upset and he's crying, he can't get the words out, I started to teach him to just take 3 breaths. So like
3 breaths.
He actually does it. And then he's like, and then he can explain to you what is happening. Whereas before it was just like, he just gets more upset and he's crying. I'm like, you can't even tell me what's wrong. So I can't even help you if you don't get it out. But I love the way you shared that lesson with your son is like, well, you enjoy doing this. When you do this again, well, guess what? You're gonna be even better next time. That's a great.
Yeah, and I think what you said, saying it out loud, is really, that's a good point. And when you hear the words that are in your brain, you get upset about things that I don't know how you do it, but our mind sometimes just makes everything seem a lot crazier. Yeah, when you say it out loud, you're like, oh, it's not so bad.
Well, even when you say it out loud, sometimes you don't even know that's what you go to your head, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. That's crazy. So I work as a coach, and I work with my coach, and I always love I call it stream of consciousness, because sometimes you don't even know what you're upset about in your own head, what's going around. And then when you're talking with someone, you say it out loud, you're like, is that what I'm holding on to? And whereas I find that if you don't get to say it out loud, then it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and then just grows legs and arms and becomes something more than it should be. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So what advice would you have to new leaders out there that may be interested in finding a coach? How do they go about that process, and how important do you think it is to have a coach?
I think it's extremely important. Like, especially what I saw during the pandemic, I was just like, everybody needs a coach. Trying to homeschool, remote work, trying to manage teams, with all the issues during the pandemic, all the different changes. I was like, everyone needs a coach, especially that. I kind of call them like those special moments where you go from being an individual contributor to a leader. You need somebody at that time where you can just share things out with, like, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I try to handle a one-to-one. Just having that safe space where someone can actually just, be a sounding board is just hugely, hugely important. So for me, I came out of the pandemic thinking everyone should have a coach. But then I went into work. I work at a company where we try and sell coaching, and it's not as easy as I thought it was. But if you wanted to find a coach, you can. I hope I can share my website with you.
Yeah.
You can reach out to me. There's a great company called the ICF, so you can go on there. I think they should have a register of coaches, but there's many companies now who are supplying coaches for corporate, and I'm sure if you go on LinkedIn and you did a search, you find many coaches. and just trying to pick. I think the biggest one is you have to pick somebody that you feel a connection with and they feel you can trust. Because the biggest thing is not so much the tools and everything else you use, it's feeling that you can trust this person, and so you can open up, and the person you can go below the surface, so that you can then start to get some insights about what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. How can people connect with you online, pick up a copy of your book, and learn more about, coaching and the things that you do?
If you wanted to reach out to me, my website is dreamcatchersperformance.com, and please reach out to me through there. You can actually book a coaching session if you want on there. My book is called Real Talk, is on Amazon, so I'll share the link with you afterwards. So please get a copy. I also have my website, so if you go to the Real Talk tab, you can take an assessment to see how your mental fitness is doing, and you can actually schedule a call with me through that. So I would love to, people to reach out, take an assessment, and let's just have a conversation.
Yeah, and I'll link all that up in the show notes at geekleader.com, so people can click through and get a copy of that book and connect with you on LinkedIn and all that good stuff. So I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, John. It was great, really great. Enjoyed this conversation.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.